All right, it is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is an open work session of the city of North Kansas City. Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Tonight's work session is on concepts for Town Square. The city has discussed making improvements to the Bob Bledsoe Town Square for a few years. In May of 2019, the city conducted a work session to discuss possible improvements to Town Square. And based on the feedback that was provided by the council at that work session, the city budgeted $200,000 in the fiscal year 2020 budget to undertake some basic improvements, but that project was placed on hold due to COVID. And then when the fiscal year 2021 budget was considered by the council last September, the council removed that project from the budgeting process. So it's not currently a budgeted project. As staff begins on preparing the proposed fiscal year 2022 budget, we're looking for some discussion and guidance from the city council as to what your vision might be for Town Square that would help us with planning and budgeting in the months ahead. So with that, I'd like to turn matters over to the Community Development Director, Sarah Copeland.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to start with just a few broad concepts as we start thinking about Town Square tonight. First, I want to clarify the first page of your council memo shows an outline of the area that the city owns as Town Square. It's a C shape where the two ends of the C reach out towards Erie Street. We're also including in our discussion the area that's currently owned by Northtown Devco between Swift and the city-owned parcel. Northtown Devco is interested in conveying that property to the city, and I think most people consider that to be part of Town Square and don't realize that it's owned separately. So we're going to be talking about those two areas as Town Square tonight. We're not discussing the breezeway that connects Armour Road to Town Square as part of this area. We just want to make sure that we're all focused on the same area as we start this discussion. Staff, we know that this area is very underutilized, but we still think it's a very important asset, particularly as more people start to live in downtown North Kansas City or south of Armour Road. I think the importance of this open space will just continue to grow. It's very difficult for us to acquire more open space in North Kansas City, so this is a key asset for us. And tonight, we're really looking for direction to help us determine next steps, whether that's budgeting or additional planning for this area or any other next steps that we might take. So we would like you to give us some big picture direction so that we can figure out what the next concrete steps are that we need to take as a city. So the memo that was put before you has 5 key questions where we're looking for direction. And I want to give you kind of an overview of those and then dive into each question individually. And a lot of these questions are then illustrated by the 3 concepts that were also included. Confluence put together some big ideas for Town Square and defined 3 different concepts, hopefully to get you thinking about possibilities for this area. We're certainly not tied to any of these 3, and we can mix and match elements from each of them to put together what you think is best for the area. So big picture, the 5 key elements that we need direction on. One is active or passive space. And I really want to say here, it's really an and or, active and or passive space, because we could easily encompass both of those in this space because it's easily divided into 2 parts. So active space, playgrounds, ball fields, anything where people are actively engaging in an activity is active space. Passive space could be, in general parks terms, could be seating, it could be conservation. It's more passive. We could do both of these. So concept A shows bocce ball courts as an active use. Concept B shows a yard game area. For passive spaces, concept B shows swings. Concept C shows bench seating with art walls. So there are lots of different ways that you can put together active and passive space. And the question of programming and events is very closely related to the next question, which is about vendor space. So I want to try to divide those 2 concepts into 2 parts. Vendors could definitely provide programming or events, but not necessarily. The city could also do that ourselves. So programming and events could be a beer festival, it could be movie nights. All three of the concepts put together by Confluence show how we could set up pop-up tents in this area to show that it could be used for various programming events that might need tent space. Concept A also shows a stage. So we could program this space in a variety of different ways or hold a variety of events in these spaces. The third big idea is about vendor space. So all three of these concepts show a different type of vendor space. Concept A shows how chapels could be used as a vendor for this space in the back of their building. Concept B shows the possibility of adding a new vendor space and how you could add a movie screen there. Concept C shows a bar vendor space, which none of these necessarily have to be food and beverage. For B and C, they could be another type of retail vendor. But the question of whether you would want to include that is a key consideration. And then question number 4 is whether you want this to be a wow space where we are really trying to make a splash, or if it's low key where we want it to be usable, but maybe not something that's regionally significant. And then the now or later question is whether you want us to make these investments now or at some point in the future, or, again, whether we want to phase things in over time, particularly since this space is easily divisible. It could be that we want to make an improvement in one section now, and we're going to improve a separate section later. So those are the 5 big questions where we would like to get your direction. If you don't mind, I'd like to start at the beginning with active and or passive space and get your feelings and your direction on that topic to start.
All right. Councilmember Roberts.
Well, I really like what you all have put together in terms of different ideas. I think this has long been an underutilized space. Many times throughout the years, I've tried to facilitate events here, but yeah, they weren't functionable here. But I think having something that is both active and passive, I really like the concepts here on. Let me see here. I think it's concept A. Yeah, concept A and concept C both have, and then concept B both have interesting things. The things that I'm not too excited about are things that I believe we already have taken care of in the Parks Department. I'm a movie theater guy, obviously. I don't think we need another movie night. We already have those covered here across the street and also at the parks, arts in the parks and movies in the park. Likewise, I think music is heavily covered in this city. I don't think we need to dedicate building a stage out, but I do like the idea of adding more options, particular active options that require little effort on the city's part, whether that be like, fields markings for, something like bocce ball or whatever it is. But, we want to make it so people can bring their own stuff. Bocce ball is kind of not overly popular thing. So I think you want to look at maybe something more simplistic that has wide reaching abilities, not saying basketball, but something in that sense that is a low point of entry. People could just come and interact with. But I also love the idea of having vendors or other businesses having the ability to rent out at least a portion of the space. I think that's a tremendous feat to be able to offer businesses in an incubator-like sense. You can have a little pop-up like, whatever retail spot one weekend and or like a wine walk or something like that. I think this is a terrific space for that. But I think a hybrid space is perfect here, active and passive, if that's answering that first question.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Piggyback on that. I would think we have the ability to do both active and passive. So I think that's important to do both. I kind of liked item as far as B. I like to kind of, whatever you call it, what do we call that? Exhibit B for the town square. But I don't, like Adam said, I don't think we need a movie night. We've got a lot of music covered. Even if we wanted to do some music, doesn't mean that we couldn't have a temporary stage somewhere in there to do that. And I like what we're doing here to get this a community green space for people that live both, are going to be living south of Armour Road and people that are from the neighborhoods as well. I know several businesses before have talked about them paying the cost and just taking it over, but I think it's such a great asset for us that I think we should look at what we're going to do with it. But to answer your question, Sarah, I'm with Adam, active and passive both. I like the cornhole You know, like you said, something simple and kind of like the lounge chairs looks pretty cool. So.
Yeah, I have to say, we knew that showing a movie screen probably wasn't going to resonate when we already have, you know, someone on council who is in that business, but we wanted to get you all thinking about different types of uses. So understand that the music and movies may not resonate, but, you know, just wanted to get your creative juices flowing. So other comments about active versus passive?
Councilmember Toll.
I too think it could be used for both. It's a great space. I am not in favor of doing something like bocce ball or cornhole or anything that requires items that can be taken off the ground. Because without somebody stationed there, I think they'll be lost or stolen half the time. You'll end up with, you know, unusable games in that way. But I don't think we need a splash pad, although that's super cool since we have a splash pad somewhere close. I don't know if it would be better to wait until the apartments are in and we see the clientele. I think having a mixed use space with something like the tire swings are interesting in concept B, or something that's family friendly would also be nice. I hate to advocate for that though, before we have a park in Ward 4. So it might be something that we look at in the future in stair steps.
Thank you, Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, so I actually see the space more as a passive space personally. And for some of the reasons you guys just pointed out, I think a lot of these themes are redundant, such as the movie theater. Obviously, we have movies at the park. Adam Roberts has a movie theater across the street. If you want to play cornhole, you can walk down the street to Chicken and Pickle. I fear redundancy, and we also don't want to step on any of our local businesses' toes. If people want to go play cornhole, I suggest they go to Chicken and Pickle and spend some bucks there. Same thing with the beer garden concept. We have beer gardens literally all over our city, and so the idea of a pop-up beer garden just sounds kind of ridiculous. When you can walk to Cinder Block, you can go to Bello Garage, we have beer gardens all over the place. We have a dozen beer gardens. So to me, it's more of a passive space. I went and walked around and checked out the area over the weekend and shot a video and gathered feedback from the community. And people had ideas that were all passive ideas, like farmers market, craft fair, art show, concerts. Obviously, you wouldn't want like a Pantera concert here, but maybe like a jazz festival or something, mellow vibes. Also, I've spoken with Mayor DeLong, about community engagement. We're trying to think of ways to get the community more involved in, these decisions being made. And I think that this discussion we're having right now is a perfect example of an opportunity we have for a community engagement event. And I suggest that we open this discussion up to the community and invite residents and business people to the town square, and perhaps, have treats and invite people in and have a comment box and see what ideas people have for this space. And instead of us, sitting around discussing it, let's open it up to the community. So that's my 2 cents. I think it's a passive space. Thank you.
So I'm going to jump in real quick, then I'm going to call Councilmember Clark. For staff, what would the schedule? I mean, right now you're trying to get some feedback from us. Is there an opportunity down the road to include some community engagement as well?
Sure. Although I would say that in my experience, the best community engagement comes when you clearly define what it is you want the community's feedback on. Like, for example, if you all think that this is an active space, but the community engagement is all passive ideas, then puts us in a strange position where you've given us direction that then the community engagement isn't aligning with. So I would say, and the now versus later is a budgeting question. So we need you all to give us some direction, and then that would help us to define what questions we're asking the community so that their feedback is well used and useful.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Clark.
Thanks, Sarah, for your patience. I feel like my initial knee-jerk reaction to this was just like, this has to wait. And so I didn't really feel jazzed about just announcing that as soon as we start the conversation. But I I'm in favor of more green space, the merrier. We need to encourage as much green space as possible. So I guess that sits under that sort of maybe passive. Yeah, I can agree on, you know, the different like bocce ball. In my mind, I was thinking we don't have things fixed there at all. Just people could kind of come up and, you know, maybe there is like a tournament of sorts or this stuff that people can do and they can kind of bring their own, or like the companies around there kind of do a quick little, we're going to do a fun day for lunch and we just go out here. I don't know the options there, but I'm just a bigger fan of like the green space, but I am a even bigger fan of holding off because I just feel like we have some Ward 4 fish to fry. So but I'm being selfish, but not really. That's it.
All right, I'll just jump in real quick. You know, I like the idea of having this being a really flexible space. You know, definitely providing a place for people to go, having places for people to relax, do activities, host events. But, you know, also, you know, you get too many permanent fixtures in there, then it becomes harder to hold certain things. So definitely want things, you know, we can move around. I want it to be a flexible space. So whatever that doesn't directly answer your active or passive, but kind of looking at active and passive versus programming and events, I'd like to see a little bit of all of the above. So definitely make sure we consider that, because I wouldn't be a fan of, for example, a permanent stage. You know, you could get a temporary stage or bring a stage in. There's a lot of ways you could do that, but would definitely want this to be a very flexible space. Excited we're talking about this project and definitely support doing this, because I do want to see that area activated. And also, you know, once we get 18th and Swift built and some of these other projects, you know, just give people another place to go, to congregate, to, you know, be around other people. So thank you. Anyone else have comments on active or passive right now? All right.
So if you...
Oh, Councilmember Saber. You're muted.
Okay, I'm not sure about the distinction between active and passive. It seems like depending on what particular event we do, you could label it either way. The idea is to get use of that space and not to have it locked in any way. I agree with the mayor on that, in keeping it wide open in the sense we could program different things at different times and make it an attractive space that even when nothing is going there, people get in the habit of using it. Right now, no one really uses it except for taking breaks from the nearby businesses. And that's a vast waste of a city resource.
All right. Thank you. Sarah.
So if I can repeat what I've heard from you all, what I'm hearing is that since a lot of you said you liked both active and passive uses, and then several of you said you liked the more passive uses and flexibility, is that perhaps the passive uses are the greater portion of the space, and any active uses are kind of more dependent on the rest of the space. There's a desire for flexibility, and we definitely want some of the space to be passive uses. Is that a decent summary?
Councilmember Graves.
I just want to chime in again real quick, just to point out that I did reach out to residents in our community, and it was overwhelmingly for passive usage. So I just want people to realize that I'm listening, and I feel like there's representation in this conversation that aren't really reflecting what people in the community actually desire. And I think we should get more community input and not just the, you know, I guess Councilmember Smith's not here, so there's 7 of us plus the mayor discussing it. And I will give credit. There's one resident that did want a skate park in this space, and there's a huge desire for a skate park. And I hear y'all on that. I just don't think this is the right space for that. But that was from the community. The only active usage suggested for this space was skate park. The rest were all passive. Just my 2 cents on that.
All right, thank you. What do we got next? You want to
next is programming and events. And just from your previous comment, it sounds like there's a definite interest in the space being able to provide for programming and events. Like that would be a big thumbs up. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, so on that, if we don't have planned events, then I think the space is just going to be, we're just going to be wasting money. If we just build this nice space and we don't have planned events. And again, back to residents, there's a lot of us, myself included, that would like to see some type of farmer's market. And we even have residents here in North Kansas City that sell wares at the farmer's market down at the city market. We can't compete with the city market, obviously, but if we built this space and it was friendly for vendors, there's vendor space. Perhaps if we had one day a week set aside, not competing with the city market on the weekends, like perhaps in the middle of the week, something like that after work, and have a little musical performance, maybe performance art show, people selling fresh produce, things of that nature, and it was like a weekly event. I think we might get more usage out of it.
Councilmember Plumley.
I personally am really in favor of the event space, specifically if we could eventually incorporate some type of First Friday type atmosphere in that area. I think everybody loves that in the Kansas City area, and right now it's pretty predominantly kind of centered around the Crossroads, which isn't too far away from us. And I do think that a lot of the people who live in our city would come to that same area. And I do think it would be a very interesting space with the nearby breweries that are located within it. And I do think it could potentially be something where it would be like little pop-ups or mom and pop shops that want to sell jewelry or art or whatever they want to do, and kind of turn that into our own First Fridays in the near future.
Thank you. I like that, because we definitely tried second Saturdays, and I think there's potential for this here to be a central location where you could have vendors and people go in and out as they're patronizing other places nearby. Councilmember Smith and then Roberts. I'm sorry, Clevenger. Jeez.
Whew, yeah. Okay, thank you. Don't insult me. No, I'm just kidding.
You're going to be waiting all night for waiting for Smith.
A couple of things, I volunteered when we had the farmers market over at the next to the lofts on Friday. It was on Friday mornings. It doesn't, necessarily have to be that day if we decide to do something like that. A couple of things you got to look at is who's going to run the farmers market, organize it. At that time, the business council took care of it. I don't know if they'd be willing to do that again, or if it's the city or whoever puts it on. I'm assuming that we would have the flexibility like you spoke about then, Mr. Mayor, of like having space there, like on maybe like a vendor space, and then it can be changed to basically passive, like Wes was talking about, where residents can go and chill out or maybe take a picnic lunch or something like that. But the other thing too is if you get too large, I mean, it's a decent sized space. You also have to look at some parking, unless it's mostly Northtown people that are walking there to the park or biking. Just a couple of things to look at is parking. And on the farmers market, I like the idea. I volunteered at the old farmers market. Have to have somebody to organize it. So,
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah. So with First Fridays, I think it's important for people to realize that we still have ongoing second Saturdays, but that First Fridays is not something that the Crossroads Association made. And every small sect of Kansas City has tried to replicate that and continues to do so. If you go to Lee Summit, they'll have some version of that. Parkville has some version of that. Everyone has their attempt to replicate that, and they all pull very little people and spend a lot of time and resources. I mean, to a certain extent, we've tried that too. And I think I'd hate to see a lot of space and time and energy being spent on trying to do something where we already are kind of trying to do that with second Saturdays. But if we want to go that route, I think bringing in the River North District into that and seeing if they want to spearhead maybe this as one of their specialty things and spaces, because they are very into the arts and the small businesses, and putting on events is kind of their jam. I do think that having the ability to rent the space is incredibly important. But as Wes mentioned, if you don't have Keystone events, if we don't at least attempt to do like, Sunday or Wednesday is a farmer's market, then the space will inevitably be blank again, because I know we used to utilize it until, the new park and Mackin Park stuff became available. And then all those things went over there, the music and the movies and the events, the arts in the park and all those things. So we don't want to replicate those things, but we want to have Keystone events and probably reoccurring events. But I think what we're all saying is that somebody's gonna have to run this and organize it. We prefer passive events. And if we're going to do that, we need somebody that can take charge of that. And I think, I really think River North probably makes the most sense because they are doing all of the things we already mentioned. So I think bringing them in for some level of conversation probably makes the most sense. But if I just want to clear the air, we will not, it'll be impossible to create a First Fridays. So let's just ease that down. We don't have the space. I mean, what makes First Fridays is that you have an entire district, a real district, you're talking 20 by 20 blocks, where people can walk and they have open areas. And it was created because there was a lot of vacant spaces. That's something that could potentially happen on Swift if we got a bunch of people involved to open their storefronts to artists and musicians. And if the city was on board for letting people drink and do all this stuff in the streets. But it's not something you're going to put in a space that's 5,000 square feet. It's just not going to happen. It's the Arts Walk, which if we want to go to the Arts Walk, we can do that. But we do need somebody to spearhead that. And that's my 2 cents there.
All right. So next, Councilmember Toll.
I agree. We would need somebody that was going to be organizing that. So I guess we'd have to talk to outside people or see if that would be happening in-house. I think the only way to use this space continuously, not just on evenings or weekends or events, is to make it a mix of passive and active space. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount. So if you look at the renderings that they have here, the large part of it could be passive space, and you could easily add a family-friendly component that keeps families and people walking through it and using that space at all times.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Saper.
I agree with both Councilman Roberts and Councilman Tull. However, there's one issue that we've also had, is that communicating with our residents. And it's been suggested that we hold sort of not just neighborhood, but ward meetings there to bring people into the space. It's going to be a process to get people to use an unused space, and organized events can help, but still, as Councilman Roberts pointed out, those have failed in most other parts of the metropolitan area for the variety of the reasons that he mentioned. But the council itself could kill 2 birds with 1 stone by starting to use that space for communicating with local residents. And we can do that on a regular kind of basis.
All right, Councilmember Roberts.
Going on Councilmember Saper's idea there, you could even, the education of the space is going to be difficult because it is kind of a strange space where its location. So you're going to have to really, really try to get residents to know about it. But you could even, I don't know if we can even do this. This is probably a question for Eric or Mr. Barzy, but hold a city council meeting there, for example, that's a little bit more inviting than the cold chambers of the city hall. I'm sorry, City Hall. But utilize it so that you feel a little bit more inviting. And if you could bring, I don't know, I know a number of you have gone to mixers over the years where staff has tried to bring, business owners in or residents in, and the turnout's very dismal. So it is an uphill climb to get that to happen. So you just have to try a mix of things, because this is it's a very cool but horribly underused and kind of a bizarro space. But I certainly see a lot of potential in it. I mean, I walk by it all the time. It's cool.
I think on public meetings, the one thing, at least council meetings, I think your regular council meetings, you definitely want those generally at your principal building. People always know where they are. I mean, that's part of, but I definitely see a lot of room for public engagement events and other events, as was brought up by the previous council members. A lot of room for improvement there. Next up, vendor space was next on the list here. And I would just add real quick that, I think when we're not using it for something, it'd be a great space to include seating and patio spaces for businesses to use. But again, as I mentioned before, we'd like to see that be flexible so that could be moved and changed, and the space would have a wide variety of uses. Did anybody have anything for vendor space? Councilmember Toll.
I think from the reading more than the drawings, my concern is that we just put a bunch of eating spaces out there for use of the businesses and not make it a community space. Because if it really does need to be a patio space for those restaurants, we might look at lots of other options. I don't know. I think in the reading that Chapels was looking at exclusively maybe renting it. I'm not sure if that's a good business to get in or not. I could see a mixed use of that space where people could get their food and take it to the public space. But that's just one thing I wasn't sure about, building outdoor seating with public money for private business. But if it was more of a public space where you could just grab your stuff and go, then I would be way more in support of that.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments on vendor space? Seeing no other comments, we are at, oh, sorry, Sarah.
Does that mean that you are interested in having vendors being able to use the space, or you're not interested in having vendors using the space?
Is that for Councilmember Toll?
It's for all of you.
Okay. I feel like I'm mixed on everything. There's kind of a mix here because there definitely is a balance of allowing it to be used, but I also don't want it to become the exclusive use of a certain place. So I don't want just one business to really lock down a section and it feel like it's permanently theirs. I want everything to kind of have that open feeling where, a variety of business. If you go over to Cultivar and Cheesy Street, you should be able to get something over there and walk over here. And I think kind of like what Councilmember Toll is saying is to be able to sit down and enjoy the amenities over there. So that's my perspective. Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, adding to that, I think if you give, patio seating, like Councilmember Toll said, they're going to want to use that when it's nice all the time, except maybe like on Sunday or when they're not open. But as far as if we're looking for community and for our residents and what they want, I don't know that they would want just extra patio space. I mean, like you said, they could grab their food and take it over there. A lot of people now, they'll grab, a few people they'll grab a sandwich or whatever and go sit at one of the tables. But, like you said, having a mix, the flexibility. But my fear is, and it would be cool for some of those businesses, but now like Chapels has the breezeway, some tables there. They got some tables out front and plenty of space inside. So, I mean, that is a concern if the tables would be there permanently and then trying to work in the city events of what we have. And then if you've got vendor space as far as trying to create retail down there with like a farmer's market or it's, resident sales, stuff like that, then that would be more difficult to coordinate.
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump back as I look at the memo real quick. I think about food stall, and I think Councilmember Graves mentioned earlier. I mean, we have a lot of businesses that could provide stuff there. So I guess, if there's some sort of amenities that they would need to be able to, transport their business there, maybe even have a rotation of various businesses come into the space. I just don't want to see it locked down to like one specific business. And I saw a lot of hands go up here. Councilmember Toll.
I just want to clarify, I am not against Chapel's residents or customers using the space. I just don't want to envision that is a space where waiters or waitresses come out and it's exclusively one business. I think all of the businesses could use it. I think having some outdoor seating space makes sense. There are some creative ways of doing that. I didn't want to be picking on one business. And I do hope that it's used, during the day by people grabbing lunch or in the evening with event space or whatever. I would much prefer it be full of people. I was just not wanting to, have waitresses bust the tables if they're public tables, but I think it should be out there, for people to use. Like if you get your lunch to go, I just wanted to be clear. I do hope people use it from all over.
So what I'm sorry. Oh.
Go ahead, Sarah.
What I'm hearing then is that you all are interested in vendors primarily for events, but you're not interested in vendors being able to use the space exclusively in any way.
I see.
Okay.
I did see two hands though, real quick. Councilmember Roberts. Then.
I think, like any event space, I think there could be different types of vendor contracts, and I think it would be smart to have them individual days and possibly, like, I mean, it's because we're such a rough space of time right now of like anything could be happening here. It's kind of hard to say anything, but like in the sense that Iron District or any of these places that have multiple businesses under their umbrella, they have a finite predetermined amount of time that they could sign up for. So whether that's a year, a month, a weekend, or whatever it is, I think that might make sense. Again, if we have permanent structures where I could have, you know, my clothing store I want to do, and I want to have it every weekend, whatever, for the foreseeable future, then I would sign and have to pay something to, you know, some kind of licensing fee to the city, and it should be within reach so that anybody could do that. But I think we're so, you know, we're really far down the line when we're talking about like how long somebody could have a contract. But I do think you should be able to have a day and probably more than that, but not like, probably don't want to do a year contract with somebody, because then you get into, you know, potential problems, especially at the beginning. I think we're going to figure out a lot of stuff if we're dealing with vendors. But I think everybody along the way has said that they appreciate the idea of having rotating vendors and don't want to be exclusive to anybody. But there's going to have to be a lot of flexibility, I think, is what we're hearing here, and that somebody's going to have to really kind of maintain and run this sort of like a business.
Councilmember Quality.
I was just going to add on to what Councilwoman Toll said in terms of like the picnic area. I think I envision it kind of what downtown Crown Center area kind of looks like, where there's a bunch of tables and umbrellas for people to kind of sit and get whatever they want in the local areas and then come sit outside, and it's not really tied to any specific vendor. I also think it could be a cool space for us to put or invite food trucks if we did want to have some type of festival, and just have an open picnic area for people to use, especially in the warmer months of the year, and then have things that are around it that would kind of force people to want to stay in that area, whether they're watching their kids or they're playing a game or doing whatever, maybe they're shopping or whatever that is. I do think a picnic area could be really beneficial in that space.
Councilmember Saber.
Yeah, I'm really opposed to it. The idea of contracting it out to any one vendor, even for a day or a week or a month or a year. I like Councilwoman Plumby's notion of having multiple vendors possibly in the area, as they once tried in Mackin Park to get food trucks to come into Mackin Park. Something like that would not lock us down and not have us favoring one business over another by allowing them to do that, but open it up. And I like that idea much better.
Thank you, Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, just real quick, something to keep in mind is I spend a lot of time down at the city market, and if you're a vendor at the city market and you rent a space to sell your goods, you can basically back up a truck right in front of your space and unload. You know, you have a booth you can set up, and it's easy to get in, unload, pack your stuff up, and get out. So something we need to keep in mind with this space is if we do envision this as like a flexible kind of pop-up space for different events and different vendors, we need to make sure that there's accessibility as far as vendors being able to get in and get out. So if these walkways, breezeways, whatever you call them, have a bunch of permanent fixtures or trees and stuff in the way, it might become, you know, a pain in the neck for people. Might not want to participate as far as unloading, getting in, getting out, things of that nature. So just keep that in mind. If we want to attract vendors, we need to make it accessible.
All right, thank you. Next up is WOW or low key. Sarah, did you need anything else for vendor space?
No, that I think I think that's pretty clear. So WOW or low key would be the next question.
Or low key. What do we got here? Anybody? Councilmember Roberts, please.
I think if you go low key, this is going to be unused. I think you need people to know this is a space. I think it's just kind of silly to assume low key. If low key is what it is right now. You can't, yeah. So I think you want it to be a nice, attractable space. I think all of our other parks and amenities are very nice and pleasant for people that don't live here to come enjoy and people who do live here. So you do want the wow factor. And I think with all of us saying potential for vendors to come in and out, yeah, you want a wow and to keep coming back.
Councilmember Columbia.
I'm going to agree with Adam here, where I do think we do need to make it a wow. I personally would envision it to be kind of a headquarter where people know that, you know, town square is where, you know, events happen, where people can go and, you know, something's always going on. I do also think it would be a unique place to kind of have like a monthly big event, whether it's like, you know, pumpkin carving in the fall, or it's, you know, a Halloween themed party where kids can come trick or treat, or kind of make it kind of a standard place where people know, you know, something big is going on there every month and kind of look forward to it so that there is attraction to that area.
Thank you. Councilmember Cloutier.
Wow. Yeah, definitely wow. I think we've got great amenities. Agree with both council people that said that. As far as the drawings and renderings, I think kind of like the light columns are unique thing. I've seen them a few times, but they're not all over. I just don't know how other people feel on that, but that's just my 2 cents on the lighting. but definitely we want a quality product that people will want to come and use.
Councilmember Toll.
I think these are all great ideas. I'm just concerned. I know that Councilmember Roberts keeps saying it, but everything that we're talking about with this flexible space is going to take a lot of work. Like somebody's going to have to be able to do it. So I don't know if we envision the pumpkin carving being sponsored by Parks and Rec, if we envision a beer garden being sponsored by any of the breweries or River North. Sarah, do you know if staff is available, at least city staff is available to manage something that we're talking about?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, to be honest. I mean, the reason we're asking you these questions is so we know what are the capital needs for the space. Because before we can have a wow space that offers, you know, a place to host these, you know, monthly events, we have to figure out what kind of improvements we need to make to the space and when those can be done. So I think that even if we get through this conversation tonight with a clear idea of next steps, it'll be a while before we're in a position of hosting those events, because there would be some work that we would need to do first.
Okay.
Councilmember Cloutier.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like, as we've all stated, we know, like, as I said, with like the farmers market that I volunteered at, is that you have to have organization and someone to run it. So I think, you know, what we're trying to do is get a vision of a broad spectrum of what we can possibly use the space for, flexibility, and some of the other comments about vendors and what have you. But also we're going to have to take a hard look, is that, you know, these are great ideas as far as events, and just finding someone that will take care of that. Like maybe Parks and Rec can do like the pumpkin carving, or maybe Expressive can do like a painting night, what have you. But you know, certainly we're gonna after we kind of get an idea of what we want with the space and an overall concept, then there's going to be a lot of work as far as who's going to organize these events.
Councilmember Clark.
Is that me? Yeah, I would just say I'm kind of laughing inside because I'm like, low key wow, because I think I like the idea of flexible space, obviously. And when I think like wow factor, I think like walking up and being like wowed, versus like the wow factor could be like that tucked away wow factor of like, oh, it's very capable of sound, lighting, and shade. You know, like I just think of like some sort of like temporary structure opportunity, some good sound quality opportunity, and, you know, lighting opportunity, but doesn't necessarily have to like punch you in the face on entry. And to again reiterate the as far as if the wow or sexy factor is being able to unload, I'm all for that too. But I guess we can, you know, put that under the wow factor as well. But yeah, everything else, because I was like low key wow. Like I don't think we have to like jazz it up. You know, I mean, murals, stuff like that, great fun. But yeah, so capable wow.
Councilmember, is that it? Councilmember Grace.
I'm also in favor of low-key wow, and low maintenance. So I did some research on kind of the history of this space, and they ran into issues in the past. There used to be a fountain here, and it became a maintenance issue. And again, I spent a lot of time at the city market, and they've done a really good job at that space where it's very easy to maintain. They just added some kind of multi-level seating areas that it's kind of like stadium seating, but it's like poured concrete, and it looks really nice. It's very functional, but it's also low maintenance. You don't have to worry about, planting flowers on it and things of that nature, but it looks classy. They have nice signage. So I think that we should make it a wow space, but I don't want to get into something that has like a huge maintenance cost that we're having to dump money into. Like, for example, one of these renderings included a splash park. Things of that nature, I think we should stay away from. I'm thinking more like permanent art installations that are kind of weather resistant, stuff that we're not going to have to mess with replacing and maintaining throughout the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm seeing no other comments on this one. The big question, now or later? Any council member feedback on now or later? Councilmember Clevenger, then Graves.
I'm kind of torn on this one. I mean, I know we've got some big issues. My only fear is that if we put it off, how much more expensive would it be in a year or two? I know that the apartments, are going to be done for another year or two. I don't know if we have any estimate, or if we would even know, how we could break it down, whether it be more expensive now or prices will go down and it may be cheaper in the future. It may be more expensive. So I'm kind of torn on that, and I'd like to other people's comments.
Councilmember Graves.
I say now. Later on in our council meeting, we're discussing the streetscape beautification down Armour Road and down Swift. The time is right. Also, I went back and watched. There was a meeting where they kind of discussed what we're discussing now back in May of 2019, and there are only 2 people on the council right now that were in that meeting in 2019, and that is Councilmember Clevenger and Smith. DeLong was on the council. He's now mayor. And so if we delay this, then they're going to be having this exact same conversation in 2024 or something like that, and this area will look like crap by then. So I say now. Thank you.
All right, I'll just chime in real quick with now. There, that was quick. Anyone else? Seeing no further comments. Sarah, anything else to add?
Well, I guess my only other question would be, is there any other direction you want to give us as we start thinking about next steps for this? Maybe coming back to the comment about community engagement, these 5 questions were intended to give us some direction on what the capital needs might be for this space. And so we've definitely gotten some good direction from you. If there's anything else that we did not bring up that you want to express, we're all ears.
All right, Councilmember Roberts.
I think one thing as we go into planning, we've all mentioned this being a passive space that could have vendors or multi-use. Wes brought it up already, but I don't want it to be lost on his point of loading in and out. It's a pretty interesting space. So I think when you look at parking around the area, I think you're gonna have to consider a designated space that's relatively easy for people to load in and load out and be able to move things in. And that's possibly even from a city perspective. Like if we want the ability to have a pop-up stage, or if we want the ability to roll in and out some activity type stuff, being able to bring it in easily is going to be important, I think, to the project. But low cost, I think, or low maintenance is important, and as much of a green space as possible and self-sufficient space as possible, whether that means like finding a way to have like self-powered solar or something like that, just to utilize the space and its functionality a little bit more and make it part of the design. I think from the beginning is always an interesting thing, I think, for me. But yeah, definitely considering load in and load out.
I would point out that we will, regardless of what we do with the space, it could be the biggest wow active space with all the vendors. We will still have to provide access to trash dumpsters in this space, so that will continue to be a key element of the design. will be how we accommodate the trash dumpsters that come in and out off of the space as well. So loading is definitely something that's already kind of on our list of items to address.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Just a quick question, as far as it looks like we're going ahead with now, which I'm good with. And I thought I saw in the memo where they were asking if we phase it or just do it all at once. And I think if we do go now, then we need to do it all at once with no phase, just one phase to cover everything.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, so myself, Councilmember Clevenger, Mayor DeLong, and some other people might have showed up after I left, but we went to Coffee with the Cop last weekend, which was really well done, and it brought a lot of members from the community in, and it seemed like an event that you can put on for very little cost. And can we do something like that in this space, and actually, instead of having people take an online poll or looking at Facebook comments, I would suggest actually inviting members of our community to the space, have them actually experience the space, and then ask them what they would like to see here and get their comments at that time.
Thank you, Councilmember Toll.
Yeah, I think this was good to do first, because even when we've gone to other public comments thing that we went and voted on the splash pad or Armour or Burlington, I think we do have to have some concepts already modeled like they did here for us on this meeting, to kind of give some direction as to what's possible in an active space, what's possible in a passive space, what's possible in a mix of the two spaces, and what could it be used for. And then I'm just going to throw out a wow factor that I always love, which is using the umbrellas, like the actual umbrellas as your shade. They have to be pretty tied up tight. I love that so much. I think it's so cute. I think it would be fun in that little pocket area with lights. So that's just my idea of cuteness. Wow, that's my wow.
Wow, thank you. Any further comments from council members? All right, anything else from staff?
Nothing else, thank you.
All right, thank you. Then we are adjourned, and I will see everyone at 7 o'clock.